and he won the first game of the time control, so he draws the second with black, repeating a variation from earlier. This bishop takes h7 pawn didn't amount to anything, but I'm still surprised to see them repeat the opening. But that was a good result for Magnus Carlsen.
And tentatively, a good start to the 3-minute segment. He wins the first game with white. He draws from a position of strength with black. And the lead hasn't reached the kind of proportions where you need to go crazy in every game. I think he's realized that. He's departed from, King's Indian and e4, c5. He's doing what makes him comfortable, and I think that's Magnus's path to coming back in this match.
For sure. He doesn't need to take huge risks at this point. So much time is left in the match. Let's remind everybody, there are 45 minutes, you see the top left of your screen, remaining in the 3-minute plus 1 second increment time portion. After that, we get 30 minutes of bullet chess. So many games remain in this match. Magnus does not have to just throw everything at Hikaru just yet.
Absolutely not, but he might have to throw something at Hikaru. They've had this pawn structure before. That game ended up in a very heated draw. Is there anything for white here, or is it a purely symbolic advantage? The eval bar seems to claim that white has a little something, maybe due to his control over the e-file.
Don't play knight c7 here. Bishop takes knight, queen takes queen e8 would be check and mate. So watch out for your last rank.
And it would be a logical move. Try to get the knight around to e6. Knight e6 is a better move because now if you do the same thing, it merely leads to a queen trade. You can pick up e8 and then block on f8. Magnus poking and prodding and shuffling and chiseling. And he's trying his best to milk a little advantage out of this position.
Okay, don't play f3 because there's bishop h4, something to note. So he just trades light square bishops and he's going to take the e-file. No, this actually is a nagging advantage for white if black is not careful. Because king f8, you would like to play rook e8 after, but there's bishop d6 check in some of these positions. You just have to be careful here.
And he does play king f8, so he sort of fakes Magnus out. Rook e8 could still happen. Bishop d6, amazingly, there's bishop e7, Robert. I'm not actually sure that that's that bad for black.
Yeah, good point. That you just are trying to trade off these pieces there, and everything is protected for Hikaru. And I'm looking at the ratings. Hikaru 32-17, Magnus 32-13. They're 4 rating points apart. They will jockey for position on the Blitz leaderboard.
So I think the big question here, if we pull up an analysis board, we won't do that a lot, we promise, in the 3-minute segment. But real fast, g3, rook e8, bishop d6 check, bishop e7. The question actually is the pawn endgame totally lifeless? Probably the answer is yes, but these pawn endgames can be deceptive. I was also thinking about a move like bishop e5 here, but black just pushes the bishop away and then moves his bishop back to d8. And if you go back to d6, there's just king f7, Robert. So I feel like this is hope chess. I think rook e8 is unstoppable, and the advantage is going to evaporate.
Good recognition from Hikaru Nakamura. Bishop d6 check may look scary at first glance, but it leads to nothing. So we're going to get a pawn endgame, king and pawn endgame that is, and there should be no advantage for white there. And something Hikaru does very well, Danya, is waste match clock. So g3 was played, by the way, that if there is a draw, he'll play it out for the full 50 moves. He's not just going to get a draw.
And they're playing this line out. Now, bishop e5, f6. Of course, if white wants to draw, you trade everything on e7, but you're absolutely right. Hikaru is good at forcing that clock down. He's also good at getting time advantages, and Magnus can't just let his clock get down to 10 seconds because anything can happen in that situation against Hikaru.
That's right. And I'm wondering why there's even any advantage on the evaluation bar for white.
Why 0.4?
If you swap everything on e7, the only difference is that white is opponent g3 and black's king is a little bit more active. So why would white be better? That's the question I don't have the answer to. And bishop f4 played, bishop f6, we might just see a draw.
And Hikaru just adhering to his strategy. He's up by 3. He could try to play that position. I think against anybody else, he would make a move like f6. But he respects Magnus, and he knows that as long as he holds his own with black and puts pressure with white, he'll be good. Decision time for Hikaru.
And I think I saw Magnus' screen change for a second, so I feel like he looked at the camera and he saw Hikaru leaning back because Hikaru's going to waste time right now.
Oh, he's going to wait for 2 minutes? I forgot.
Yeah, he's going to play bishop f6 after using all of the time on his clock.
Yeah, he's just going to sit around, sip his whatever's in that stein of his, and this is going to double as a rest time for Hikaru. You can just see him totally relaxed there, looking up at the heavens, Beth Harmon style, and waiting for that clock to tick down.
You know how in baseball, when you're going to walk a batter, you can just say, I'm going to walk them, so you don't have to throw 4 pitches, right?
I don't really watch baseball, but yes.
it's a waste of time. So my point is, I feel like we should implement like if it's going to be a resignation or it's going to be a 3-time repetition, you just allow the players to tell you that, and you just take it off the match clock, because the players, they do get a little bit of rest. That's the good news for them. But I think it's hard to sit and just do nothing, as Hikaru is going to make the draw, but we're just waiting for his clock to hit 1 second left.
What do you think the stoppage time is going to be when this match hits 90 minutes? No, just kidding. No stoppage time in chess. Well, Hikaru has stopped the match as he waits. You can let 48 seconds evaporate and then call the timeout, end the game with bishop f6. He has measured it. He knows it's a 3-time repetition, and the game ends automatically. Fun fact, Robert, you'll co-sign me on this. Over the board, there's actually a very strict procedure for claiming 3-time repetition. You actually cannot make the move itself. You have to stop the clock, call over the arbiter, the tournament director, the person who makes the results official, and you have to show him the actual repetition on your score sheet. A lot of people don't realize this, and they actually miss an opportunity to claim a draw because of the improper procedure.
Yeah, but I'm less preoccupied with procedure here. The draw is by repetition. Hikaru 12.5 seconds on his clock, so he didn't go all the way down, but he did burn some important time potentially, because if Magnus can't score some victories and then he starts cutting to lead in bullet, he needs all the time that he can get.
Yeah, no, this is totally valid. Totally valid match strategy. And a little change as Magnus tries to keep more life on the board. He doesn't just want another one of those draws. He plays the old school Breyer system.
Yeah, this like Zaitsev, Breyer. He's keeping everything defended for black, but at the same time, you're quite passive. So white strikes on the queen side with a4, and now you have to be very careful if you're Magnus. The b5 pawn, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It can get in trouble if white piles up pressure on it, but he brings his knight to b6. He's challenging the a4 pawn.
But b3 would restrict the knight. The Breyer system, named after Gyula Breyer, Hungarian player from the 1920s, one of the hyper-modernists alongside Richard Redi and Nimzovich and others who modernized openings and played a lot of stuff that we still play to this day. And I think modern computers don't particularly like the Breyer, but it is a relatively fresh position and one that Hikaru might not have looked at in a while. That's at least what Magnus's thinking goes.
And that's smart. That's how you prepare at the highest level, because all players are well-versed in a variety of openings. You need to catch your opponent off guard. And the last move, bishop d3, may have caught Magnus a little bit off guard, because he's sitting and thinking his idea behind the move a6 to a5 was to put his bishop on a6 and start taking over light squares on the queen side. So the bishop comes to d3 to stop that plan. In comes Hikaru's bishop to b5. I don't really like the look of the move c7 to c6. I know you block the bishop and attack it, but your bishop on b7 will look silly.
Ooh, and neither does Magnus, but neither does the eval bar like the look of rook to e6. This invites d5, Robert, and d5 opens up a pathway for the dark squared bishop. Isn't d5 just good for white? What am I missing?
It is. All right, we see the evaluation bar go up, but I feel like if you're not precise, this is a position that gives black some chances to strike back, because you've closed the center, and maybe at some point you can try to play on the king side. The issue is you're never getting f7 to f5 in, even if you move your knight, because look at the pawn on e4 and the knight on g3. White is just ready to meet that pawn break.
Yeah, bishop to g5, inducing f6. Now drop the bishop back to e3. He goes bishop f6, but still, you now can no longer play the move f5.
Wouldn't be surprised if Hikaru plays h4. He plays bishop e3 instead. But I thought he might just try to keep his bishop in place. But the knight comes up to c5. Take me, please, says Magnus. Give me the bishop pair. And maybe it's, I was going to say time for bishop g5, but I forgot the rook is awkwardly placed on e7.
I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. This is actually a position very reminiscent of a King's Indian structure on both sides of the board. And normally when you get a knight ensconced on c5 like this, black freezes white's pressure. But here comes the knight. Around to b3 it goes. And once white goes c5, that's like stepping on something with your shoe. Bang, crunch. And black's queenside can collapse real fast.
It's looking bad for Magnus Carlsen right now. He would like to connect his knight. But as you're pointing out, the knight is going to b3 anyway. There's just no pressure in the position. Black has nothing here.
Nope. And I'll tell you what black has. A 1-minute deficit on the clock.
Not good. King g7 is a very Magnus-like move, but he has to already watch out for bishop takes c5 and knight b3. That you might just lose a pawn in positions like that. Knight b3 by itself is looking strong, and you see Hikaru. He keeps raising his eyebrows. Like, what is going on in this match? Something about Magnus's play seems very off.
And that decision to play rook e6, I know I have the benefit of the eval bar. I get that, but put that aside. Very uncharacteristic misjudgments, intuitive misjudgments, errors in calculation. And the problem when you're down by 3 is that you lose all of your momentum. If Hikaru wins this game, it's as if nothing ever happened. It's as if Magnus never won that first game.
It's true.
Bishop g5.
Bishop g5, f6. If bishop takes f6, you don't have rook f7. So he trades.
But what's the idea here? He sacks the pawn to keep the knight alive on c5. That I actually really like from the world champion.
This is positional brilliance because he gives up material to keep the knights on the dark squares. And if he can play bishop a6 or bishop d7 and trade off that light square bishop, a4 and c4 and e4 and d3 and b3, all these squares are vulnerable to black's knights.
You're absolutely right. And this is the Magnus that we're used to. He's shown signs of life in the 3-minute portion, but can he finish this defensive effort? He's still worse, right? No question about that. Hikaru very much still playing for the win. And Hikaru might try to trade places. Maybe go bishop c6 and knight b5. He trades and will go knight b5, I assume. No, he puts his rook on the open file.
And the good news for Hikaru is he has all of those pawns protected. Now he's got a beautiful pawn chain, connect 4, and then another knight comes to c5 for Magnus. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a g5, h5, g4 at some moment just to get some kind of play on the king side. You're down a pawn there, but you can open up lines for your rooks.
And White has all the open lines he needs. He has exactly one open line, and he might put his second rook there and try to infiltrate b8. I don't know who exactly benefits in the event of a rook trade. What if both rooks are off the board? Is that knight endgame drawn? Questions that Magnus just doesn't quite have the time to answer.
But Hikaru's thinking here because he goes knight e2, and I guess if there's ever g5, he has knight g3 to f5. So you need to be careful before you push any pawn because the square that was previously under your control gets weak.
And maybe Magnus just wants to lock up the king side with h4 and g5. No, he does go g5. He allows knight g3, and I think Hikaru's going to play it.
There might be an exchange sack. I was wondering if he was going to play h4 and sack the exchange and bring his king up.
He's going for an attack. He wants to checkmate the white king on g1 eventually.
And he plays g4. The point is you take twice. e4 is hanging with check. So you cannot keep capturing on g4. The lines are opening up, and that's good news for black's rooks and potentially bad news for the white king.
And even better news for Magnus, the clock situation beginning to equalize. Hikaru forced to calculate, and this has been phenomenal defense thus far by Magnus Carlsen, but can he keep it up? Rook to h8, preparing to occupy the open file he's created for himself. He's got the most counterplay he's had in a while.
And there's knight d3 check if you're not looking out. If you're Hikaru, there could be a knight d3 to f4. So he plays rook d1. He hangs the a4 pawn because he wants rook a1 at the end, winning the a5 pawn.
And maybe Magnus will just double on the g file. That pawn is a decoy, but it's a juicy pawn indeed.
Watch out for rook takes c5 and d6. I'm wondering if there's an exchange sack here.
Oh, just going for that knight on f5. No, Hikaru brings his rook back to a1. Magnus fine with a repetition.
He would be fine with repetition. Why not? He has 16 seconds. He's
go rook b8.
Down a pawn. He goes rook b8. I'm wondering if rook takes c5 will be played by Hikaru.
That would be an incredible call and very risky move, but a potentially rewarding move. That knight is a beast. But no, a draw. And a dodged bullet by Magnus.
In a different game, in a different match, perhaps Hikaru would go for it, but he doesn't need to take a risk. He's up 3 points. It's up 8-5, but Magnus Carlsen gets the white pieces, and we have another Catalan.
Another Catalan, another A4 system. And I think that was a really big result, Robert. Even though it wasn't a win, that was one of the biggest games of the match. Magnus loses that one. Like I said, it's back to a 4-point lead. I think he's played a couple confidence-boosting games thus far, but can he make the most of the white pieces?
That defense was unbelievable, right? He just gives up the F pawn and then makes it look easy from there. So a great job from Magnus. He's getting this position again. We keep seeing this opening played. And this time there's a knight on b4 and the dark square bishop remains for white.
It does indeed. And have we had a slight deviation from the 5+1? I feel like they haven't had this exact position. They've had this exact structure. The rook usually comes to d8. We know the drill by now, don't we?
Yeah, the bishop on f4 is gone for that knight on b4. So it is a different position. More pieces remain. And that should be good news for white because black is a bit cramped.
And h4 by Magnus using tactics to defend the pawn. And the bishop will drop back to e3, pinning the rook to the queen.
And queen a6. So if you trade queens, the knight goes back. And look at this, knight c4, bishop c7. You might just win a pawn.
Not quite yet, though. The knight defending that square. But at the moment it moves, you are leaning into c7.
No,
I got you.
I hung a piece there. Yeah, but, it's my rule as a commentator. You always have to be willing to be incorrect.
Uh-huh.
I blundered a piece. It happens. But no, bishop c7 would be great except for the... Oh, no way! Oh, my gosh! Oh, my gosh.